with fairness and consistency. One thing I came to understand is this: most murders do not begin as murders. They often stem from small misunderstandings that escalate into serious, irreversible acts of violence. I suggest to the powers that be, ensure that officers deal with every minor matter effectively to prevent an escalation to a murder. That I practiced during my time in law enforcement. I recently had an opportunity to visit the grieving family at Viewfort North, and my heart goes out to them during this difficult time. My experience as a law enforcer tells me that effective policing and control of the murder rate does not come solely from the quantity of police officers or resources, but more importantly, from the quality of both, amongst other things. What is required is a strategic, well-coordinated, and multi-sectoral approach, one that brings together law enforcement, community organizations, social services, education, and other key stakeholders, all working towards the common goal of crime prevention and reduction. This, therefore, requires leadership which is trusted and capable. And this, therefore, takes me to the matter of the recent promotions within the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. Let me begin by saying that promotion within the Royal St. Lucia Police Force is necessary. It is important. Any effort to strengthen leadership capabilities and, in principle, is a positive step. Let me clarify. I am not here about the individuals who were promoted. This is not about the individuals who were promoted. This is about the process, because the process is what guarantees fairness and builds confidence within the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. The recent promotions guidelines in the Police Force Orders, March 2026, totaling 92 officers across various ranks, are indicative of an intention to strengthen leadership and operational effectiveness within the organization. The promotions are as follows: 7 superintendents, 11 assistants superintendents of police, 13 inspectors, 14 sergeants, 8 corporals, and 29 special police constables. It must be noted that from special police constable to inspector is directly under the purview of the police commissioner, and from inspector to commissioner, from ASP, assistant superintendent of police, to commissioner is under the purview of the public service. However, notwithstanding this progress, there are several serious concerns arising from this latest round of promotions. These concerns center primarily around what appears to be a lack of adherence to the established promotional guidelines of 2012 and the blatant violation of the police promotional regulations of 2006. The violation of promotional procedures. The Royal St. Lucia Police Force has a well-defined and legal supported framework intended to ensure that promotions are conducted in a fair, consistent, and objective manner. Unfortunately, the March 2026 promotions appeared to have bypassed several critical components of this framework. There was a lack of vacancy notice. I clearly recall during my time in the police service, a memo would have been circulated that there are vacancies, and it would itemize which ranks and how many vacancies are available. This was not done this time around. The regulations require that vacancy notices be issued prior to the commencement of the selection process, specifically at least 1 month in advance, according to the guidelines, and a minimum of 2 weeks under the regulations. There is no clear indication that this requirement was met. The second issue is bypassing the promotions committee. During my time, I participated in the promotion process several times, and there was a promotions committee. The established process mandates that the involvement of a formal promotional committee, inclusive of representatives from the Ministry of the Public Service and the Ministry of Home Affairs. This structure exists to ensure impartial oversight and to prevent unilateral decision-making. The apparent absence of this process raised concerns about whether the Commissioner of Police acted within the benefit of independent review and recommendations, including those from immediate supervisors. This process is very important because you may know that such a huge organization like the police force, the commissioner may not know every police officer. And that does not mean that because he doesn't know the police officer, that the police officer is not working. The officer may be all the way in Labrie and is working, all the way in Soufrière is working, and other ends of the country. And it would be very important that we get recommendations from the immediate supervisors to channel it from the bottom to the top to ensure a fair process of promotions. That in itself was absent. The omission of the selection assessment, including written promotional exams, structured interviews, and team-based evaluation exercises, are mandatory elements of the promotion process. These do not appear to have been conducted for this cohort. I clearly recall, once again, from constable to corporal, I wrote the promotional exam, I attended the interviews, and we had the team exercises. This time around, that was not done. There is a blatant disregard for merit and qualifications. The promotional framework established during the tenure of Senator and Minister of Home Affairs, do I have that correct? I should move the title. But the promotional framework established during the tenure of Dr. Jimmy Fletcher was especially designed to ensure the promotions are awarded to officers based on merit, competence, and objective criteria as outlined in the second schedule. The current promotions, however, appear inconsistent with these principles. Experience required by police officers for promotion. For example, promotion from constable to corporal typically requires a minimum of 5 years of service or 3 to 4 years of service in conjunction with an advanced academic qualification such as a bachelor's or a master's degree. There are concerns where these benchmarks may not have been consistently applied. The training requirement. Officers are required to complete a minimum number of developmental and academic training courses at a recognized institution. Then again, I recall we needed 3 courses which would last more than 8 hours. No, more than 40 hours, sorry. 3 courses totaling more than 40 hours. From constable to corporal, 5 courses to sergeant, 8 courses to inspector. This is uncertain. This was certainly not done in this round of promotions. Performance benchmark. Eligibility for promotions require a minimum of 140 points based on the last 2 appraisals. This is uncertain whether the standard was uniformly enforced. The third issue that we have is an impact on moral and perception of victimization. In recent past, we saw over social media and also on mainstream media where certain police officers were transferred. I was one of them. I opted to transfer myself to my home. Yes. By disregarding the established process and application for the promotions framework, these are which were intended to rank officers based on their aggregate performance. This is a perception that most qualified and deserving police officers had been overlooked. This has led to concerns of marginalization and possible victimization among police officers who have diligently met all required standards. As we speak, I know of several officers with degrees and masters who were not promoted. And I know, I worked with them that I was their supervisor. They reached all the required benchmark. And these officers were not promoted this time around. The lack of transparency. The governing regulations clearly requires that the selection criteria and the process by transparent and are applied uniformly. The absence of clarity surrounding the March 26 promotions undermines confidence in the system and risks to erode morale within the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, as well as the public in the leadership of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. In light of the above, we respectfully request, in the public interest, that a comprehensive explanation be provided regarding the process used for the last promotion. Additionally, we urge that steps to be taken to reaffirm the Royal St. Lucia Police Force's commitment to fairness, transparency, and adherence to the established regulations and guidelines. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Kakal. Good morning to members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, and my good colleague, Mr. Calix Xavier. I'm here this morning, regrettably, to bring you bad news. And, you know, it wasn't so long ago, I stood in the Parliament of St. Lucia, in the Senate to be more precise, and I told the government side that as of 2023, there were 11 Caribbean destinations that had surpassed their COVID numbers, and St. Lucia was not one of them. The CTO statistics then suggest that there were a growing number of Caribbean destinations that were on the brink of passing their COVID numbers, in addition to those that had already passed their pre-COVID performances. It goes on to state that the Caribbean grew by 14%, and St. Lucia grew at half the pace of the rest of the region, at 7%. We highlighted then to the powers that be that tourism was underperforming. Unfortunately, today, 3 years later, we have another CTO report where they have reported on the region, and we see a similar trend. The Caribbean, several destinations are growing, and St. Lucia, unfortunately, on this occasion, has fallen behind. St. Lucia has had a 5% decline based on our preliminary estimates. Now, we have a dearth of data because unlike previous times where the St. Lucia Tourism Authority used to make their reports available monthly, we're now told that that practice has been halted. So it is for the powers that be to explain why the reports are not circulated on a monthly basis. We haven't had any update from the Minister of Tourism. We're now in the month of March, in the month of April actually. We've lost an entire quarter in the following year, and no report from the Minister as to how the industry has performed, as to whether we grew or whether we have fallen behind. So we have had to now get this information from the Caribbean Tourism Organization, and they have reported that St. Lucia has actually fallen behind by at least some 5%, while the other Caribbean destinations are growing significantly. We see in the case of St. Lucia, total arrivals, that is a collection of cruise and yachts and stayover arrivals or hotel guests, added up to somewhere in the region of 1,136,111 tourists coming to the destination this year. This is actually 66,370 less than last year. So it would mean that St. Lucia would have lost a significant ground. Why is this important? This is important because every time that one less visitor comes to the island, it means that there is a worker in a hotel who has less days, who has less service charge. There is a treasury in our country that collects less taxes. The tax that the hotel's guests would pay on every booking, every sale of a vacation attracts VAT in our country. It would mean that the taxi driver has less trips to do, and it would mean that the vendor has less customers to sell to. It would mean that ancillary businesses like tours and attractions and restaurants and spas and all of those ancillary services sectors would actually have less customers to sell to. So the sustainability of the tourism numbers is absolutely crucial from the standpoint of the human impact that tourism creates. We see quite recently the government announced that there were problems in the marketplace. In the UK market, for example, we saw numbers suggesting, at least in the first 2 quarters, where we had a 20% decline in figures from the UK. The Canadian market, just as significant, a 20% decline in Canadian arrivals. We saw last year in May, June, July, we saw cruise numbers going down by 35%. Significant meteoric drops in the numbers, which suggests that we are going in the wrong direction. So if we're going in the wrong direction, what is the root, therefore, of these problems? For a long time, we've been saying to the government that the airlift strategy is not robust enough. So let's look at what has happened in the airlift sector. We've lost TUI, which came from London in a Dreamliner. We've lost Virgin Atlantic from the UK market. Significant airlift. Virgin came at least 3 times a week in the winters. But before that, we've lost on the US side of business, American Airlines from Chicago, American Airlines from Dallas, American Airlines from JFK. We've lost JetBlue out of New Jersey, Newark. And we've lost United Airlines. So we've lost a significant amount of flights. In fact, the Social and Economic Review suggests these numbers. So if you go on page 120 of the 2024 Economic and Social Review, you will find that the difference between where we were in 2019, which is pre-COVID, with our air landings in St. Lucia. So you look under the headings at Uranora International Airport, you would see that just at Uranora Airport alone, we have lost some 1,513 flights. That's a significant number. And if we multiply that by the average air seat, which is 165, we would have thousands of passengers less, thousands of air seats that have been coming to the destination. So it doesn't matter whether we put on a big jazz festival, doesn't matter how much we expand by, doesn't matter how many Airbnbs we invest in. Once there's no way or there's a reduction in the number of options to get to St. Lucia, it would mean, therefore, that people will be hard-pressed to do so. And this is the problem. So we move from 12,268 scheduled landings to 10,755, which is a significant decline. These are just airplane landings at Uranora International Airport. So please check it out for yourself. The Economic and Social Review, it's online and it's on page 120. So I have seen the Minister of Tourism suggest that it is because of us losing some of our rooms to renovation and construction. And I want to disabuse the minds of the public with that untruth. Because I go back to the Economic and Social Review again, and if you look at it, it will show you that the national occupancy of St. Lucia is at 70%. It would mean that 30% of the rooms in St. Lucia are unoccupied. 30% unoccupied. If you claim that 500 rooms, which represents 10% of the room stock, is out of circulation for varying reasons, it therefore tells us that there is another 20% of extra capacity. And plus, there are thousands of Airbnbs, people who have built villas and apartments and cottages and a wide range of St. Lucian investments that are in that sector that are now starved because of this badly managed airlift strategy in the country, which is affecting a number of these Airbnbs. And so the goal now must be to get as many flights into the destination so that we can get these Airbnbs working again. So we don't accept that it is because of renovations to hotels. We in fact attribute this to a failed airlift strategy by the government. You know, my colleague also spoke to an issue related to crime. And our findings suggest that crime continues to nag away at St. Lucia's reputation. Whether we like it or not, every time on Hot 7 or HTS or DBS or any of these stations that I heard today, when you report on crime, that information could be found on Google, it can be found online. And travelers today, when they are traveling to a destination, they try to check the place out. They try to find out what's going on, what's there to do. And invariably, some of your stories are going to come up in the algorithm. So if we have less crime for you to report on, I think it is going to increase the favorability of the destination. And I think that the destination's brand is going to be in good stead if we're able to do that. Unfortunately, we have not been able to get a handle on the crime situation. So much so that recently, a well-known hotel had a travel advisor against it. It is not good when these things happen. But as a destination manager, the government ought to make sure that we are dealing with these things, that we are preempting these things, that we are making sure that the crime situation is put under wrap. I know recently several hotels from Suffolk attempted to meet with the Minister of Tourism to express their deep concern about the crime situation. And then previously to that, the SLHTA wrote a letter to the police commissioner, Mr. Verngard. I can make a copy available to all of you before leaving. And they highlight a number of concerns. Increase incidents against visitors in the Rodney Bay area. They also highlight increased burglaries in several areas. At the time, they reported on the closure of the Rodney Bay police station, which was in fact something that was fundraised by the hotel community, but the government had kept that closed for many, many months. So we have to make sure that we get on top of crime, because crime is a significant impediment for growth, as we have seen with other parts of the Caribbean that have sought to recover from tourism. So in a nutshell, what we have found is that as the Caribbean continues its resurgence from COVID, as the Caribbean drives demand, as the Caribbean, I am impressed with what's going on just next door in St. Vincent. Their growth numbers are spiraling. They have a new Sandals property. They have other investments that have come in. They have had a brand new international airport for quite some time. And they are doing the right things in the last 2 to 3 years to make sure that their destination can grow. Here in St. Lucia, we have now put up our cruise tax. And the question must be asked whether raising the cruise ship tax and the declines we have seen in cruise arrivals while the Caribbean is growing, does that mean that the ships have now diverted from St. Lucia and taken the business elsewhere? Those are important questions that we must raise. Has the GPH deal had a negative impact on the tourism sector as it relates to the number of cruise calls that we have received? And the answer is yes. I know, for example, in Antigua, that some of the larger cruise lines, while they would have raised protestations about the cruise tax, they actually renegotiated with the government, and they were allowed to come into Antigua outside of the GPH charges because the cruise lines were complaining about this additional cost which were affecting them. So while other destinations are doing what they have to do to get the business, we are here stalling our airport while Dominica is progressing smoothly, but we're happy to talk about Dominica's airport. And they look like they are expanding and going ahead with the construction of their airport services. And we are just here playing politics. We've done nothing to our airport project. We've done nothing to advance it along in 5 years. So we are really behind the curve. And whilst St. Lucia would have been more established at a number of Eastern Caribbean destinations, if we're not careful, we can be overtaken by them. So we're very concerned about this recent development. These stats, they point to a significant trend, which we've been pointing out since 2023, where St. Lucia's recovery has been slow. But yet the minister goes out with these blanket statements, no evidence, no empirical data to substantiate his claims that he's had many record years ever since he's been in government. And really, that's unfortunate to the members of the public, because I am not sure whether the media is furnished with the actual report from the Tourism Authority so that you can go through the numbers for yourself. I am not sure that you are furnished with the economic and social review so you can go through the tables for yourself to see where the numbers have been trending. So for me, I'll stop here, and my colleague and I will take any questions you may have.
Good morning, Josiah Bissett from Hot 7 TV. My questions for Mrs. Xavier. So,
Morning, sir.
Morning. So, in your statement, when you stated, especially with the increase in homicides, and for a while, the Prime Minister has stated that the government does not get involved with matters of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. With this rise in homicides getting a lot more frequent, do you believe that it is time that the government now takes more of a first hand within the role of the police force? Speaking as well from a former sergeant as well in the force, do you think that it's time that government should now get more involved in the inner workings of the police?
Mr. Bissett, the government should have always been involved. So if they are not involved presently, that means they are not doing an effective job in curbing the crime situation that we have in this country. This statement from the government that they're not getting involved in police matters is absolutely absurd. Any other questions?
Don't you think that it's a bit disingenuous to suggest that the government, this present government, is responsible for the state of the crime situation in St. Lucia when both administrations have suffered under this cloud of criminal activity?
I have never stated that it's only one government who contributed towards the crime situation, the present crime situation. But what we could see now is that there is an increase in the murder rates and also in other categories of crime. We could see that they claim that they have more resources and they have more police officers. I could say, well, if there is quantity, it doesn't seem to be working. We need quality.
Well, not disingenuous at all. I think that this administration has to shoulder significant responsibility for its very passive approach towards the management of the crime situation in the country. When you have a minister of national security says over and over again that his father was the policeman and he is not, that's not acceptable. When you have a prime minister who's the protector in chief, if you ask me, say those words, he's setting the wrong tone. He's making it appear as though it's a free-for-all. I think that governments are responsible to send a very clear signal. Other governments around the Caribbean, I look at Jamaica, for example, and they have had a 43% decline in their homicide rates. They are actually enjoying, for now, since 1990, they have not had homicide rates that are as low. And that is because they did the hard things. They did state of emergencies. They had curfews. They came hard at the criminals. They spoke tough. They sent a very clear signal that Jamaica was trying its best to move away from crime. We've had instances where there was no canine dog in the canine unit. We've had instances where the government has not shown that level of responsibility. I mean, when you say, yeah, we've done this and we've done that, but new police stations and vehicles, replacing vehicles that went bad, they're really not working. And I think that the government, clearly, when you look at the stats, the results are showing something else. Crime is certainly not declining, it's growing. And it means that if you are trying to curb something that is growing, then I think you've got to backpedal and review the situation. That's all we're saying. The government has failed to have one symposium where they invite the opposition. When we were in government, these are all steps that we took to try to improve that situation and address the crime situation in the country. I remember my former colleague, Harmon Gill, having a national symposium to fight crime, to make sure that we bring all stakeholders together, and those stakeholders included the voice of the opposition.
Hi, Chloe Dantes, NBC Prime News. Is there any truth to reports that Marcella could actually replace Alan Shasti in his own constituency?
That sounds like yeah. I haven't heard the rumor, so I can't respond to it, the speculation. Sorry. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Okay, so questions are being raised about the pace of rebuilding within the United Workers' Party following two heavy election losses under the same leader. Critics and supporters are wondering why it's taking so long to establish a clear structure and direction, especially at a time when strong leadership and organizations are seen as crucial for regaining public confidence. What do you have to say on that?
Well, I can assure you that it's not taking long at all. I can assure you that a lot is happening behind the scenes, but those are internal party matters that we don't discuss at press conferences.
My next question. What new approach will the party take to win back public support?
Those are matters that you discuss at press conferences. If I were Donald Trump and I was standing here, he'd be like, would you like me to give away my war strategy, my national security strategy? No, I think that that's very sensitive. Again, that's an internal party matter. But I want to assure you that it's an exciting time to be a UWP. All right, well, thank you all, members of the press. Thank you for coming. Have a good day. Thank you for